Civilization was built on a conversation you never heard. This is the hidden map of how the ancient world shared its greatest ideas. By the end, you will see history not as a series of isolated events, but as a single, sprawling story of connection. How did a monk's journey across a desert change the philosophy of an empire? What secret did a simple trade good carry that would reshape continents? We will trace the pathways of knowledge that linked distant cultures through trade, diplomacy, and sheer human curiosity. What does this ancient network of exchange tell us about our own connected world today against the fading light? A caravan silhouette moves across the dunes like a line of stitching on a vast, sandy fabric. Its camels carry silk and spices, but their true cargo is far more transformative. This is the Silk Road, the world's first great information superhighway. It was not a single road, but a sprawling web of paths connecting the imperial courts of China to the bustling markets of the Mediterranean. For over 1,000 years, this corridor pulsed with more than commerce. It carried the very ideas that would define civilizations. The real agents of this exchange were the traders themselves. Take a people from Central Asia who became legendary merchants. They were more than just salesmen. They were translators in the deepest sense, carrying not only goods, but the knowledge of how to make and use them. Papermaking, a revolutionary Chinese technology, traveled west along their routes, eventually reaching the Islamic world and then Europe, changing how knowledge was recorded forever. Flowing in the opposite direction came the art of glassmaking, transforming aesthetics and craftsmanship in the East. These were not simple transfers. They were slow, deliberate conversations, passed from hand to hand over generations. Historians like Peter emphasize that the most profound travelers on these routes were often not merchants at all, but monks and scholars. Buddhism, born in India, found its way into the hearts of Central Asia and China because monks walked these same dusty trails, their scriptures packed alongside bolts of silk. At every oasis town, at every caravanserai, ideas were shared, debated, and adapted. This was a relay race of knowledge. A Buddhist story might pick up a Greek artistic style in Afghanistan, becoming what we call Greco-Buddhist art, before moving further east. Astronomical charts from Persia would be studied and amended by Chinese scholars. The technique for cultivating grapes and making wine traveled from the west, taking root in new soils. Perhaps no single figure embodies this opening of channels better than the Chinese explorer. Sent on a diplomatic mission in the 2nd century before the Common Era, his journeys into the wilds of Central Asia were fraught with hardship. Yet he returned with more than just political reports. He brought back detailed knowledge of distant lands, their cultures, and their goods. His accounts effectively mapped the possibility of exchange, encouraging formal trade and creating the stable corridors that would define the Silk Roads for centuries to come. Think about that for a moment. A journey meant for diplomacy ended up wiring continents together for an exchange of ideas. It makes you wonder, what are the modern Silk Roads? Our digital networks, our satellites, our undersea cables. They move data instead of silk, but the principle is ancient. We are still building on that same human impulse to connect and share. And just as knowledge transformed at each caravanserai, our ideas today are reshaped with every click and share. But these physical routes needed places to breathe, to settle, and to grow into something permanent. The bustling markets were vital, but the true engines of innovation were the intellectual hubs that rose at their crossroads. But ideas need a home. They require a place to gather, to be studied, to collide and combine into something new. This was the genius of the great ancient libraries and centers of learning. They were not quiet tombs for scrolls, but vibrant, international academies. Think of the legendary Library of Alexandria. Its famous mission, as historian Diana notes, was to collect all the books of the world. Imagine the scene, scholars from Greece, Egypt, Persia, and beyond, all under one roof, debating astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. The library was a living brain for the Mediterranean world, a place where knowledge was not just stored, but actively synthesized and expanded. This model of the centralized knowledge hub appeared again and again across the ancient world, each one a nexus in our growing map of exchange. Centuries before Alexandria, the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal built his royal library in Nineveh, collecting thousands of clay tablets from across Mesopotamia. This was not for show. It was an attempt to gather the administrative, literary, and scientific knowledge of an empire into one accessible place. But perhaps the most transformative example came later, with the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. Established during the Islamic Golden Age, this institution launched one of history's most ambitious intellectual projects, the translation movement. For generations, teams of scholars, paid by the state, systematically sought out Greek, Persian, Indian, and Syriac texts. They translated works by Aristotle, Ptolemy, and Galen into Arabic, not merely copying words, but absorbing, debating, and building upon them. This was knowledge exchange as a formal state-sponsored endeavor. The polymath Al worked there. His groundbreaking book on algebra, a word derived from the Arabic al, elegantly synthesized Indian numerical systems with Greek geometric logic. His work would later travel to Europe, fundamentally reshaping mathematics. Far to the east, another epicenter thrived. The Buddhist University in India, operating for over 700 years, attracted students and scholars from as far as China, Korea, and Central Asia. It was a residential campus for thousands, with vast libraries and a curriculum covering philosophy, medicine, and logic. The debates in its courtyards helped refine Buddhist thought that would then spread across Asia. These centers shared a crucial trait. They were multicultural by design. They understood that to advance knowledge, you needed diverse perspectives in the same room. Greek logic could inform Indian astronomy. Persian administrative techniques could blend with local traditions. By translating, these hubs did something profound. They preserved knowledge that might otherwise have been lost, and they created new common languages of science and philosophy. It makes you reflect, what are our modern houses of wisdom? Our great universities, certainly, but also digital archives, open access journals, even collaborative online platforms. They continue that ancient work of gathering, translating for new audiences, and fostering dialogue across cultures. Yet, these magnificent institutions were ultimately built by people. The grand libraries and translation houses were shells. The real magic, the actual movement of ideas, was accomplished by individuals whose curiosity was stronger than the distance between home and the horizon. A single monk walks a path of stone and sky. His name is, and in the 7th century, driven by a scholar's deep need to understand Buddhist philosophy at its source, he left the safety of Tang, China. His 17-year journey across the most punishing deserts and highest mountain passes of Asia was not for trade, but for truth. He represents the third crucial agent in our map of knowledge exchange, the mobile scholar, the intellectual pilgrim. These were individuals who carried ideas within their minds, their notebooks, and their very purpose. Their journeys were missions of acquisition and dissemination. His own meticulous travelogue, the Great Tang Records on the Western regions, is not just a geographical guide. It is a first-hand portrait of the scholarly landscape of India and Central Asia, detailing universities, debates, and the living traditions of faith and philosophy he encountered. He did not simply visit. He immersed himself for years, learning languages, copying precious manuscripts by hand, and engaging in deep theological debates. Upon his return, he spent the rest of his life translating the volumes he brought back, fundamentally shaping East Asian Buddhism. He was a one-man library and translation bureau. This model of the knowledge pilgrim was universal. Centuries earlier, Greek philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato were said to have traveled to Egypt to study with priests. Indian Buddhist masters were invited to Chinese courts to advise emperors and teach. Nestorian Christian scholars moved along the Silk Roads, establishing communities and translating texts from Syriac into Chinese, leaving behind a remarkable stone stele in N that details their faith's arrival. Consider the Korean monk, who in the same century as embarked on his own pilgrimage. His travel diary, discovered only in the early 20th century, reveals a breathtakingly interconnected Buddhist world, linking his homeland to China, India, and even the Persian Empire. These individuals were the human synapses firing across the ancient brain, creating direct, personal connections between distant centers of learning. Their motivation was often a pure, burning curiosity or spiritual calling, a need to go to the source that no second-hand account could satisfy. It makes you wonder, who are our modern knowledge pilgrims? The researcher spending years in a foreign archive, the student on a fellowship across the world, even the digital nomad collecting and sharing insights from global communities online. The vessel may have changed from parchment to a laptop, but the human drive to seek, learn, and bring knowledge home remains timeless. Yet these pilgrims did not travel empty-handed. They moved within a world of commerce, and often, the most profound ideas hitched a ride on the most ordinary of objects. A Roman glass bowl rests in a Chinese tomb, its delicate form glowing under the earth for centuries. This is not merely a traded trinket. It is a Trojan horse, a beautiful vessel carrying an entire universe of technological secrets inside its curves. While scholars and pilgrims moved ideas with intention, the silent, most pervasive agents of knowledge transfer were often the trade goods themselves. An object is a piece of transferable knowledge. To possess something exquisite and foreign is to be presented with a puzzle. How is this made? Can we make it here? This instinct to reverse engineer luxury drove some of history's most significant technological leaps. Archaeologists studying these finds note that the very presence of Chinese silk in the Byzantine Empire sparked intense, clandestine efforts in sericulture, attempts to unravel the secret of the silkworm. Centuries later, the arrival of delicate Chinese porcelain in Europe would inspire generations of potters in places like Delft, leading to the iconic blue and white pottery that imitated a technology they could not yet perfectly replicate. The object itself was the first and most persuasive teacher. Look at the stirrup, a simple loop of metal and leather. Historians trace its likely origins to the mounted cultures of Central Asia. As it traveled west, this unassuming piece of equipment revolutionized warfare by giving a rider unprecedented stability and leverage. It transformed the knight, reshaped battlefields, and altered the social order of medieval Europe. Its spread was not through a manual, but through contact, observation, and the undeniable advantage it provided to anyone who used it. Or consider the legendary Wootz steel from India, a metal of legendary strength and flexibility prized for sword making. Its trade across the ancient world carried with it the hidden knowledge of advanced metallurgy, specific forging techniques, and carbon content that smiths from Damascus to Persia sought to understand and replicate. Even architectural ideas could be embedded in small artifacts. A decorative motif on a traded textile, the design of a piece of jewelry, or the shape of a ceramic vessel could introduce new aesthetic and structural concepts to a distant culture's artisans. This transfer was not limited to crafted items. Botanical exchanges moved entire systems of knowledge. The trade of cotton plants from India or citrus fruits from Southeast Asia was not just about the seeds. It carried the accumulated wisdom of cultivation, irrigation, and processing, a hidden curriculum in agriculture that took root in new soils. Perhaps the clearest example is paper. It began as a prized Chinese luxury good. But as it traveled the Silk Road, its value as a knowledge-carrying medium became explosively apparent. The desire for it led to the capture of skilled papermakers and the establishment of the first paper mills outside China in Samarkand. From there, the technology spread like wildfire through the Islamic world and into Europe, fundamentally democratizing record-keeping and enabling an explosion of literacy and administration. The trade good became a world-changing technology. It makes you look at the objects around you with new eyes. What modern products are acting as silent Trojan horses? A smartphone is not just a device, it is a compact university of materials science, software engineering, and global logistics. The very presence of renewable energy technology in a community sparks local curiosity and adaptation. The pattern is ancient and ongoing. We have now mapped the pathways, followed the pilgrims, and unpacked the cargo. With this network in view, we can begin to listen in on the conversations that flowed across it. The first and most universal dialogue was about the sky itself, a shared human project to decipher the language of the cosmos. The night sky was the first shared map. From the banks of the Tigris to the plains of China, humans looked up at the same wandering stars and sought to chart their meaning. This collective gaze gave birth to astronomy, perhaps the example of ancient knowledge synthesis. It was not one culture's invention, but a slow, collaborative project built across continents. Historian Otto called the exact sciences in antiquity an international endeavor, and nowhere is this clearer than in our mapping of the heavens. The Babylonians, meticulous observers for over 1,000 years, developed complex systems to predict lunar eclipses and track planetary movements, seeing celestial patterns as divine omens. Their work, especially the concept of the zodiac, traveled west to Greece. There, philosophers like Aristotle and later Ptolemy layered on models, attempting to explain the why behind the motions the Babylonians had so carefully recorded. This Greek synthesis, encapsulated in Ptolemy's Almagest, became a foundational text, but the story did not stop there. As this body of knowledge traveled east into India, it met a formidable tradition of its own. Indian astronomers possessed brilliant computational systems, advanced mathematics for calculating planetary positions with remarkable accuracy. A text like the Surya shows this beautiful synthesis, using trigonometry that may show Greek influence to power distinctly Indian cosmological models. Meanwhile, in China, court astronomers maintained unbroken records of celestial events for centuries, noting comets, sunspots, and supernovae with a precision that aids modern scientists to this day. The real engine of this synthesis was the Islamic Golden Age. Arabic scholars did not merely translate Ptolemy's Almagest, they questioned it, tested its observations, and built upon it. They perfected the astrolabe, a handheld model of the universe used for navigation and timekeeping, refining its design from earlier Hellenistic versions. Figures like Al corrected Ptolemy's calculations, and the Persian astronomer Al-Sufi created detailed star catalogues that blended Arabic star names with the classical Greek constellations we still recognize. This refined, enriched body of astronomical knowledge eventually filtered into medieval Europe, often through translations from Arabic into Latin in places like Spain. It provided the very data that would later challenge the Earth-centered model itself. So when you look up at Orion or trace the path of Jupiter, you are seeing a constellation of human thought, a pattern woven from Babylonian observation, Greek geometry, Indian calculation, and Islamic innovation. It makes you wonder, is the International Space Station not the ultimate expression of this ancient collaboration? A shared platform for observing the universe, built by nations across our planet. This celestial conversation required a universal language to make its calculations, a language of numbers and forms that could cross any border. That language was mathematics. That merchant in a bazaar is not just trading goods, he is solving a problem with a toolkit assembled from across the known world. The numbers he scratches are Indian, the paper beneath them is Chinese, and the word he might use for the calculation, algebra, is Arabic. This was the silent, unstoppable power of mathematics, the sixth foundation of our ancient knowledge map. It became the one true universal language, a system of logic that could cross any border without losing its meaning. Its most transformative gift to the world was a concept so simple it seems invisible, the place-value decimal system, complete with a symbol for nothing. Imagine trying to do long division with Roman numerals. The system born in India, with digits from 1 to 9 and the revolutionary circle of 0, changed everything. 0 was not just an empty place, it was a philosophical leap, a number representing the absence of quantity that made all other numbers more powerful. This system traveled to the Islamic world, where scholars like the Persian mathematician Al embraced and refined it. In his seminal work, the compendious book on calculation by completion and balancing, he did something extraordinary. He systematized the solving of equations, drawing from Babylonian problem-solving and Greek geometric logic, into a coherent discipline he called Al-completion. His name, Al, gave us the word algorithm, a step-by-step procedure for solving a problem, the very concept underpinning our digital world today. His work, translated into Latin centuries later, carried the Indian numerals and algebraic methods into a Europe still clinging to Roman numerals, slowly revolutionizing commerce, science, and thought. But numbers were only one part of the conversation. Shapes spoke just as clearly. Geometry began with practical necessity. The ancient Egyptian surveyors, or rope stretchers, who redrew field boundaries after the Nile's floods using knotted cords to form perfect right angles. This practical knowledge of land measurement traveled to Greece, where thinkers like Euclid transformed it into a theoretical edifice of proofs and axioms. His book, The Elements, became the foundational textbook of logic for over 2,000 years. This Greek geometry did not sit on a shelf. It was absorbed into the Islamic world, where it found breathtaking application. Look at the intricate tilework, the mesmerizing star patterns, and soaring arches of a mosque. This is geometry made manifest, a spiritual expression of cosmic order and infinite repetition made possible by advanced understanding of symmetry and tessellation. The knowledge traveled full circle, as these architectural and artistic innovations influenced builders from Spain to India. This cross-pollination was constant. A version of the Pythagorean theorem was known and used independently in ancient China and Babylon. Detailed trigonometric tables, essential for astronomy and navigation, were developed in India and refined by Islamic scholars before reaching Europe. Consider the sequence, that elegant pattern where each number is the sum of the two before it. The Italian mathematician Leonardo of Pisa encountered it not through isolated genius, but through his education in North Africa, where he studied the Arabic mathematical texts. He introduced this sequence and the Hindu-Arabic numeral system to Europe in his book, directly enabling the advanced accounting and financial models that fueled the Renaissance. So what makes a language universal? It is not about spoken words, but shared logic. Mathematics provided the immutable rules, the common grammar that allowed a Greek proof, an Indian numeral, and an Arabic equation to build upon one another. It was the ultimate collaborative tool, and with this tool in hand, humanity could now speak in a new vocabulary of staggering scale and ambition, the vocabulary of stone and space. The abstract principles of geometry and calculation were about to become physically real, in monuments intended to touch the heavens themselves. Stone is the most permanent form of memory. A Roman amphitheater stands in the sands of Magna, its curved seating facing a stage where no Latin was ever spoken. In Sri, the great stupa at Anuradhapura bears sculpted figures whose flowing robes and serene faces echo the artistry of faraway Greece. These are not accidents or mere coincidences of style. They are physical proof of a seventh, foundational blueprint in the ancient world, the migration of architectural ideas. Entire philosophies of space, engineering, and community life were packaged in stone and mortar, traveling with traders, conquerors, and pilgrims to take root in alien soil. The arch is a perfect example. Its basic principle was understood in ancient Mesopotamia, but it was the Romans who transformed it into an engine of empire. By combining arches into barrel vaults and later into the revolutionary groin vault, they created vast, uninterrupted interior spaces, public baths, basilicas, and aqueducts that marched across landscapes. This Roman engineering toolkit did not vanish with the empire. It was studied, adapted, and repurposed. The soaring domes of Byzantine churches like which seemed to hang the heavens from a circle of light, were direct descendants of Roman experimentation, like the Pantheon's own massive concrete dome. Centuries later, Islamic architects looked to these very forms, refining the dome and combining it with intricate geometric vaulting to create the majestic mosques that define city skylines from Isfahan to Istanbul. This was not copying, it was a conversation in granite and brick. Each culture encountered an idea, understood its structural logic, and then infused it with its own spiritual and aesthetic meaning. The same process happened in reverse with the humble yet revolutionary qanat. This was a Persian technology for tapping groundwater, a gently sloping underground canal that could transport water for miles without evaporation. As Persian influence spread, so did the knowledge of building and maintaining these subterranean lifelines. Qanats appeared across the arid regions of the Middle East, North Africa, and even as far as Spain, enabling settlement and agriculture in places once thought barren. It was a shared solution to a universal human challenge, water, and its blueprint moved with the engineers who knew its secrets. But perhaps the most vivid crossroads of architectural exchange was the ancient region in what is now Pakistan and Afghanistan. Here, in the wake of Alexander the Great's campaigns, Greek artistic traditions met Buddhist spirituality and Indian craftsmanship. The result was a breathtaking syncretic style. Buddhist stupas were adorned with Corinthian columns and acanthus leaves. Statues of the Buddha, a form previously avoided in favor of symbolic representation, now appeared in graceful Hellenistic robes with serene, classically proportioned faces. This style itself became an export, traveling along the Silk Roads and influencing the art and architecture of Central Asia and China. You can see its echo in the cave temples where 1,000 years of Buddhist art, funded by Silk Road merchants, shows Indian deities, Chinese landscapes, and Central Asian patterns all layered upon the walls of a single cavern. Even city planning reveals this shared mental map. The rigid grid pattern, with streets meeting at right angles, appeared independently in the ancient Indus Valley city in the planned cities of classical Greece, and in the majestic capital layouts of imperial China. It speaks to a common human understanding of order, efficiency, and control, an idea of the ideal city that was traded as surely as spices. So what does this mean for us today? Look at the modern cityscape. The steel-framed skyscraper, born in Chicago and perfected in New York, is now a global vernacular from Dubai to Shanghai. The open floor plan, the glass curtain wall, the stadium, these are our era's traveling blueprints. They shape how we live, work, and gather in a continuing architectural dialogue. Yet these grand structures, these testaments to engineering and artistry, were never just functional. They were built to embody something, to make tangible the deepest beliefs and questions of the cultures that raised them. The stone was shaped by a worldview. A philosopher in Alexandria turns a page, his mind tracing ideas that feel strangely familiar, echoes of a dialogue written half a world away. This is the eighth, and perhaps most intimate layer of our map, the quiet, profound exchange of spiritual and philosophical thought. While goods and blueprints traveled visibly, the deepest questions about existence, ethics, and the divine embarked on their own silent journeys, weaving a metaphysical web across continents. The spread of the great world religions themselves are the most dramatic evidence of this. Buddhism, born in India, did not stay put. It traveled the Silk Roads, carried by monks transforming as it absorbed local deities and traditions in Tibet, China, and Japan. Christianity spread through the networks of the Roman Empire and later along trade routes, from the Mediterranean into Ethiopia, Europe, and eventually the Americas. Islam, emerging in the 7th century, rapidly expanded across Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe, its scholars acting as conduits for the ancient knowledge they preserved and advanced. In each case, the core teachings adapted, speaking to new cultures in a resonant language, proving that faith, like knowledge, could be translated. But the real magic happened in the synthesis, the intellectual borderlands where traditions met and mingled. We have already seen Greco-Buddhism in art, but the fusion went deeper. Some scholars suggest that the very methods of logical debate and philosophical inquiry developed by Greek thinkers may have influenced the structured theological discourse of Islamic kalam, and through it, the rigorous scholasticism of medieval European thinkers like Thomas. The works of Plato and Aristotle did not reach the Latin West directly. They took a long, transformative detour. First translated into Syriac by Christian scholars, then into Arabic by teams at the House of Wisdom, where Islamic philosophers like Avicenna and commented on them. These texts were finally translated from Arabic into Latin in places like Spain and Sicily. This chain of translation created a continuous, though reinterpreted, intellectual lineage that powered the European Renaissance. It was a single conversation, passed through multiple linguistic and cultural filters. Look at the concept of monasticism. The communal, ascetic life of Buddhist monks and nuns developed in India centuries before Christian monasticism emerged in the deserts of Egypt and Syria. While likely arising independently from a shared human impulse for spiritual retreat, historians note the intriguing possibility of cross-pollination along trade routes. The practices of the early Christian desert fathers, their focus on meditation, solitude, and conquering inner desires, bear a reflective resemblance to Eastern ascetic traditions, suggesting a world where spiritual techniques, like technologies, were shared and adapted. This exchange shaped the very frameworks for living. Ethical and legal codes evolved through contact. The Buddhist ideal of compassion and harm, the Christian emphasis on charity and forgiveness, the Islamic concepts of justice and stewardship, while distinct, entered into a global dialogue that gradually shaped broader humanistic values. The Confucian virtue of filial piety, or respect for one's family and ancestors, found echoes in cultural values across Eurasia. It makes you reflect, where do our own modern ethical frameworks come from? The secular humanism that values individual dignity, the global movements for justice and ecological care, these are not born in a vacuum. They are the latest chapters in that ancient, ongoing conversation about how to live a good life and build a just society. The ideas traded were so powerful, so essential, that they demanded a permanent home. They needed to be captured not just in memory, but in a tangible, reproducible form. This imperative would lead to the final, foundational layer of our map, the very medium that made all this exchange possible, the evolution of the written word itself. The very act of writing was a technology born from trade. A merchant in Ugarit needs a record not of epic poetry, but of a shipment of olive oil and copper ingots. He presses a stylus into wet clay, not with pictographs, but with a set of just 30 simple signs. This is the alphabet, and its story is the ninth and final layer of our map, the evolution and diffusion of writing systems themselves. From cuneiform wedges in Mesopotamia to inked characters on Chinese bamboo slips, each script was a different answer to the same human need, to fix thought and speech into something that could travel. And just like goods and ideas, the blueprints for writing were shared, adapted, and reinvented along these ancient networks. Historian describes the origins of writing as a convergent phenomenon, emerging independently in a handful of places, but once the concept existed, it spread like a spark. This is called stimulus diffusion, where the knowledge that writing is possible inspires a culture to create its own system, often in a radically new form. Consider the Brahmi script of ancient India. While its origins are complex, many scholars see the influence of Aramaic, a script used by traders and administrators across the Persian Empire in its early letter forms. It was not a direct copy, but the idea of a phonetic script, learned through contact, that catalyzed a brilliant indigenous invention. The alphabet's own journey is an incultural relay. Its earliest ancestors, Proto-Sinaitic scripts, were born in the crossroads of Egypt and the Levant. They were taking a handful of Egyptian hieroglyphs and assigning them sound values. This concept was perfected by the Phoenicians, master seafarers whose economy depended on contracts and inventories. Their script, efficient and consisting only of consonants, became the administrative engine of their trade empire. When the Greeks encountered it, they made a revolutionary addition, they repurposed some of the Phoenician letters to represent vowel sounds. This created a script that could map speech with unprecedented precision, a tool that would carry the words of Homer and Plato into the future. This Greek alphabet, in turn, traveled. It was adapted by the Etruscans, then by the Romans, becoming the Latin script that shapes these very words. A different branch, influenced by Greek writing in the Byzantine world, gave rise to the Cyrillic script used across Eastern Europe and Russia. Each adaptation was a negotiation, a reshaping of signs to fit new languages and tongues. The administrative needs of empire were a powerful driver. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, stretching from the Indus to the Nile, needed to govern diverse peoples. They adopted Aramaic as their official bureaucratic language, and its script traveled on official decrees and tax records. This script, carried by scribes and soldiers, became the foundation for a whole family of writing systems, evolving into Hebrew, Arabic, and Syriac scripts. Centuries later, and far to the east, this very script lineage would take another astonishing turn. The traders, writing in a script derived from Aramaic, passed it to the people of Central Asia. They adapted it into a vertical script suited to their language. Then, in a moment of profound synthesis, this script was studied by the Mongols under Khan, who adopted it to administer their vast empire. Some scholars even suggest that the elegant, geometric blocks of the Korean Hangul alphabet, created in the 15th century by a circle of scholars, may have drawn inspiration from the logical, systematic design of these Mongol scripts. It is a breathtaking chain of connection, from a Syrian scribe to a Korean king. Even the most isolated systems may whisper of distant conversations. The intricate glyphs of the ancient Maya and the earliest oracle bone script of China show no direct link, separated by vast oceans. Yet the persistent, intriguing question of whether the very concept of writing could have traveled across the Pacific, perhaps on long-forgotten currents, remains one of archaeology's most tantalizing mysteries. It speaks to the irresistible power of the idea itself. So what is our modern script? Look at your screen. Digital Unicode is the new universal clay tablet, a standard that allows every writing system, from ancient cuneiform to emoji, to exist in the same space. The smiley face, a global ideogram of emotion, is our latest logograph. We are still participating in that ancient, endless project of making marks that carry meaning across time and space. And with these marks, humanity did more than record transactions or laws. It began to assemble a permanent, growing library of everything it had learned, a library that would need guardians. The scribe's hand moves across a surface that is neither brittle papyrus nor costly skin, but something light, strong, and astonishingly white. This is paper, the 10th and most democratic medium in our ancient network. Its story is not of a single invention, but of a slow, westward migration that fundamentally rewired how knowledge could be stored, shared, and scaled. Before paper, writing was a privilege constrained by its physical vessel. In Egypt, scribes used papyrus made from reeds pressed together, a material traded across the Mediterranean but vulnerable to damp and decay. In Europe, the labor-intensive process of creating parchment from animal skins made books immensely expensive, objects for monasteries and royalty. In China, scholars wrote on heavy bamboo slips or delicate silk, one too cumbersome, the other too costly for widespread use. Then, around the 2nd century before the Common Era, Chinese artisans made a breakthrough. They discovered that the fibers of mulberry bark, hemp, and old rags, when broken down, mixed with water and sieved onto a screen, could form a smooth, durable sheet. This was paper, a technology born from recycling and ingenuity. For centuries, it remained a closely guarded secret of the Chinese imperial court, a luxury good. But secrets have a way of traveling. The pivotal moment came in the year 751 at the Battle of Talas in Central Asia, where forces of the expanding Islamic Abbasid Caliphate clashed with the Tang Chinese army. The battle's outcome is less remembered than one of its consequences. Among the prisoners taken by the Abbasids were skilled Chinese papermakers. Historians of the book, like Jonathan Bloom, detail how these artisans were brought to Samarkand, a thriving Silk Road city, where the local conditions, with its abundant water and flax crops, were perfect for their craft. The secret was out. Paper mills soon spread across the Islamic world, to Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo. The impact was transformative. Paper was not just a new material, it was a better one. It was far cheaper to produce than parchment, more flexible and durable than papyrus, and it could be made almost anywhere with the right knowledge and basic resources. This triggered an explosion. The cost of producing books plummeted. Libraries, both public and private, grew from holding a few hundred precious volumes to tens of thousands. Scholars, scientists, and poets could now afford to write, copy, and share their work on an unprecedented scale. This material abundance directly fueled the intellectual flourishing of the Islamic Golden Age. The administrative state ran more efficiently on paper records. Legal scholars compiled vast commentaries. Poets circulated their verses. Most importantly, the great translation movement at the House of Wisdom was powered by this endless, affordable supply of blank pages, ready to receive the translated wisdom of Greece, Persia, and India. A breathtaking window into this paper-based society survives in the Cairo. This was a storage room in a synagogue where, due to a custom against destroying any text that might bear the name of the divine, 1,000 years of everyday paper documents were preserved, from personal letters and marriage contracts to merchant accounts and poetry drafts. It is not a collection of royal decrees, but the paper heartbeat of a vibrant, literate, interconnected Mediterranean world. It shows how paper had moved from an imperial secret to the fabric of daily intellectual and commercial life. This quiet revolution makes you wonder, what is our modern paper? The silicon microchip, perhaps, which miniaturized information storage from rooms of files to a device in your pocket. Or the cloud, a seemingly limitless, decentralized repository accessible from anywhere. Each represents a similar leap in affordability and accessibility, democratizing knowledge for a new era. But with this proliferation came a new and urgent problem. When every scholar could own a library, how do you find anything? The explosion of texts created a chaos of information, demanding a new kind of intellectual architecture to bring order to the written world. A library without a catalog is a labyrinth of forgotten words. As the ancient world's written knowledge exploded, from papyrus scrolls to paper codices, a new and urgent challenge emerged. How do you find anything? This need gave rise to the 11th foundational system, the intellectual architecture of archives, catalogs, and taxonomies. These were not just lists, they were conceptual maps, tools that made the sprawling landscape of knowledge navigable and, crucially, shareable across cultures. The legendary librarian Callimachus at Alexandria faced this problem head-on. Confronted with the library's vast collection, he created a monumental catalog that organized works by subject and author, with critical notes. It was the world's first subject bibliography, a systematic attempt to impose order on the chaos of accumulated thought. This urge to classify is profoundly ancient. It began with the practical need to account for things. Sumerian temple administrators, thousands of years earlier, created detailed inventories on clay tablets, listing livestock, grain, and goods. In China, the imperial bureaucracy developed sophisticated bibliographies to manage its collections of state documents and classical texts, ensuring administrative continuity. These systems did more than track assets, they created standardized categories of thought. When a Babylonian scribe compiled the Equals, a massive lexical list grouping words by themes like trees, stones, or professions, he was building a shared vocabulary. This list was, and studied for generations, teaching not just language but a way of seeing and categorizing the world. It was a tool for knowledge transfer in its form. Different civilizations developed their own distinctive frameworks for this mental mapping. In ancient India, knowledge, was formally divided into fields like grammar, logic, medicine, and the arts. Greek philosophers, most notably Aristotle, meticulously categorized the sciences, distinguishing between theoretical knowledge like physics and mathematics and practical knowledge like ethics and politics. China nurtured a powerful encyclopedic tradition, culminating in projects like the Monumental, the Four Treasuries, which sought to collect and classify all significant Chinese writings into four grand categories. These classificatory systems themselves became a kind of meta-knowledge, a blueprint for how to think about thinking. They allowed a scholar in one tradition to understand the intellectual landscape of another. The Persian polymath Al-This in the 11th century. When he traveled to India, he did not just observe, he systematically studied. He learned Sanskrit, translated texts on astronomy, mathematics, and religion, and wrote a comparative analysis that placed Indian knowledge within the frameworks familiar to the Islamic scholarly world. His work was a bridge built on the shared pillars of classification. The tools for this bridging were often humble yet revolutionary. Dictionaries, glossaries, and multilingual inscriptions acted as translation keys. Think of the stone, with its decree in Egyptian hieroglyphs, Demotic script, and Greek. While its purpose was governmental, its effect was to create a permanent, public lexicon linking languages. These reference works standardized terms, allowing an Arabic physician to understand a Greek medical concept, or a Chinese astronomer to grasp an Indian planetary model. So what does this ancient drive to catalog mean for us today? Our digital world is built on this very impulse. Search engines are our global. The algorithms that curate your social media feed or recommend a book are automated taxonomies, constantly sorting and classifying information based on invisible categories. Our databases, from library systems to massive online archives, are the direct descendants of those clay tablet inventories and imperial bibliographies. They continue the timeless human project of bringing order to information so it can be found, used, and built upon. And with knowledge now organized and accessible, it could be directed toward the most universal of human concerns, not just understanding the world, but thriving within it. The next great conversation was about the body and the soil. A physician in 10th century, Baghdad opens a text that holds the world's healing wisdom in its pages. He reads of Galen's four humors, then of an Indian surgical procedure for removing cataracts, followed by a Persian recipe for a digestive tonic using local herbs. This was the reality of ancient medicine, a profoundly syncretic science where the best ideas from every culture were gathered, tested, and integrated to save lives. This 12th application, the cross-cultural flow of medical and agricultural wisdom, represents knowledge exchange at its most urgent and human. The great compendiums, like Avicenna's Canon of Medicine, were not works of one tradition but vast syntheses. As medical historian Peter notes, Avicenna systematically organized the entire medical knowledge of his time, drawing from Greek, Persian, and Indian sources to create a textbook that would guide doctors in Europe and Asia for centuries. This was a collaborative global project long before the word global had meaning. Specific techniques traveled astonishing distances. The detailed surgical procedures for reconstruction of the nose and ears described in the ancient Indian, using a flap of skin from the forehead, influenced surgical practices across the Islamic world and may have eventually reached Europe. The very concept of isolating the sick to prevent spread, a cornerstone of public health, may have roots in the disciplined quarantine practices observed in Buddhist monastic communities, which were then adopted and formalized elsewhere. But perhaps the most tangible evidence was the spice trade itself. Caravans did not just carry cinnamon for flavor, they transported it as a medicine. Myrrh was an antiseptic, rhubarb a potent laxative, frankincense an anti-inflammatory. The global was built one shipment at a time, with merchants acting as unknowing apothecaries. This constant refinement through exchange had a clear goal: to alleviate suffering and extend life. It makes you reflect on our own recent global experience. The rapid, worldwide sharing of viral genome sequences and vaccine research during a modern pandemic is the direct descendant of that ancient physician in Baghdad consulting a text from India. The imperative to heal has always transcended borders. Supporting these healing populations required a parallel revolution in feeding them. The exchange of agricultural knowledge was just as vital and just as widespread. Staple crops embarked on epic migrations. Wheat and barley, domesticated in the Fertile Crescent, spread to Europe, Africa, and Asia. Rice, first cultivated in China and India, transformed landscapes and diets across the continent. But it was the movement of fruits and vegetables that subtly changed daily life. Peaches and apricots, originating in China, became beloved in Persia and the Mediterranean. Citrus fruits from Southeast Asia traveled to the Middle East and then to Europe, preventing scurvy and adding vital vitamins to diets. This was not just about new foods, but about new knowledge. The technology to grow them traveled too. The iron-tipped plow, which could turn heavier soil, spread from China westward. The ingenious water-lifting device known as the noria, a large wheel powered by a flowing river, originated in the Middle East and was carried by Islamic engineers to Spain, where it irrigated the arid plains of Andalusia and fueled an agricultural golden age. Each of these transfers allowed communities to support larger, healthier populations on land that was previously marginal. Centuries later, the Columbian Exchange would be a dramatic, accelerated version of this ancient process, as tomatoes, potatoes, corn, and chocolate crossed the Atlantic, revolutionizing diets on both sides of the ocean. But the story does not end with survival. Once a population is fed, healthy, and secure, its people have time for something else, for play, for strategy, for the mind's recreation. And even our games, it turns out, were pieces on a global board. A Roman legionnaire stationed at a distant fort might pass the long, dark hours by moving carved pieces across a checkered board, a game of strategy whose deepest roots lay not in Rome, but in the distant Indus Valley. This is the 13th, often overlooked, layer of exchange, the global journey of games and recreational knowledge. Far from simple amusements, these shared pastimes were subtle carriers of mathematics, logic, and cultural values, traveling along the same routes as silk and scripture. Historians of play point to a fascinating pattern. Dice and board games appear in archaeological sites from ancient Mesopotamia to the pre-Columbian Americas, suggesting either very early forgotten diffusion or a profound, shared human instinct to create systems of play. The journey of chess is perhaps the most iconic example. It began in India as a simulation of ancient Indian warfare with pieces representing elephants, chariots, infantry, and cavalry. As it traveled to Persia, it transformed into its pieces and rules adapting to a new culture. The Persian term Shah for king gives us the word check, and Shah Mat, the king is helpless, becomes our checkmate. When Islamic expansion carried the game into Europe, it evolved again. The elephant became the bishop, a reflection of the church's power in medieval society. The chariot transformed into the rook, a castle tower. Each change in name and form was a translation, embedding the game into a new social and military worldview. Its pieces became a miniature portrait of feudal Europe. The discovery of the Lewis chessmen, a hoard of 78 intricately carved 12th century pieces found on a Scottish island, perfectly illustrates this network. Carved from walrus ivory likely in Scandinavia, they blend Norse artistic style with the established rules of a game born in India and refined in the Islamic world. A single object encapsulating a chain of cultural handshakes across continents. Other games traced similar paths. The ancestor of backgammon, a game called nard, was beloved in Persia and spread both westward to the Roman world and eastward to China, where it was embraced by the Tang dynasty elite. Its reliance on dice spoke to a universal fascination with chance, while its board represented a symbolic journey. Meanwhile, the game of Go, with its deceptively simple rules and profound strategic depth, became deeply woven into the philosophical fabric of China, symbolizing the balance of cosmic forces. It was then adopted and refined in Korea and Japan, where it developed distinct schools of thought and became a discipline of the mind as respected as calligraphy or poetry. The rules themselves were a language. The way a game was scored, the values assigned to different moves, or the objectives for winning all reflected underlying mathematical concepts and social priorities. A game could teach probability, spatial reasoning, or tactical planning without a single word of instruction. It makes you wonder, what do our modern games reveal about global exchange today? A video game developed in Japan, played on hardware designed in the United States, and enjoyed by millions worldwide, is part of this ancient continuum. Global sports like soccer or basketball create shared rules and a universal vocabulary of play. These are our era's living board games, connecting minds across borders through shared systems of challenge and delight. Yet games, for all their power, were a silent language. To convey the deepest myths, beliefs, and stories of a culture, humanity turned to a more vivid vocabulary, one of image, symbol, and sacred form. A dragon woven in Byzantine silk has the coiled body and flowing mane of a creature from a Chinese scroll. This visual echo is not a coincidence, but a clue. Across the vast canvas of the ancient world, a 14th layer of connection was painted in color, stone, and thread, the silent, powerful exchange of artistic motifs and sacred iconography. This was a visual language that bypassed words entirely, where a symbol could cross a continent and be adopted into a new spiritual vocabulary. Art historians like H. call this visual syncretism, the blending of artistic styles and symbols in cultural borderlands. Nowhere is this more breathtaking than in modern-day Pakistan and Afghanistan. Here, for the first time, the Buddha was depicted in human form, but the artists gave him the wavy hair, draped robes, and serene, idealized face of a Greek god, a style known as Hellenistic naturalism brought east by Alexander the Great's legacy. This was more than aesthetic borrowing. It was a translation of the divine into a visual language local populations could recognize and revere. Specific motifs became global travelers, picking up new meanings like souvenirs. The lotus flower, a sacred symbol of purity in Buddhism and Hinduism, appears in slightly altered forms in Egyptian and Mesopotamian art. The fierce griffin, a lion-eagle hybrid, guarded treasures from Mycenaean Greece to the palaces of Central Asia. The elegant vine scroll, a symbol of abundance and life, curls around Roman sarcophagi, Buddhist stupas, and Islamic manuscript borders. Religious iconography was particularly fluid. The Greek demigod Heracles, with his club and lion skin, was transformed in art into the powerful protector and companion of the Buddha. The halo, a radiant circle of light denoting sanctity, appears behind the heads of deities in Indian, Christian, Byzantine, and Persian royal art, a shared visual shorthand for divinity and power. This exchange flowed in all directions. The vibrant tradition of Persian miniature painting, with its intricate patterns and flat planes of color, deeply influenced the majestic court art of the empire in India and the Ottoman Empire in Turkey. Chinese artisans perfected cobalt blue ceramics, and that deep, brilliant pigment, along with forms like the porcelain vase, became highly coveted in the Islamic world, inspiring generations of potters from Iraq to Spain to create their own interpretations. From the Eurasian steppes, nomadic cultures spread a distinctive animal-style art, characterized by stylized, intertwined beasts, which influenced the metalwork and jewelry of both Europe and China. These motifs were a visual handshake, a way of saying, we see beauty in this form and we make it our own. It makes you look at the symbols around us today with new eyes. What are our global visual memes? The heart shape, the peace sign, the instantly recognizable logos of global brands, even the emojis we text, they function in the same way. They carry agreed-upon meanings across cultures, a continuing conversation in. But the creation of many of these ancient art objects, especially those in metal, required a knowledge that bordered on the mystical. It demanded an understanding of how to transform Earth into something luminous and permanent, a practice that intertwined artistry with the earliest foundations of science. A crucible glows in a darkened workshop, its molten contents holding secrets that could transform the world. From the smoky furnaces of ancient China to the cluttered laboratories of medieval Europe, practitioners of the 15th craft pursued a dual mystery: the mastery of metals and the philosophy of alchemy. This was far more than primitive chemistry. It was a profound, cross-cultural quest to understand the very essence of matter, a pursuit that wove together practical trade and speculative thought into a single, shimmering thread. The story begins with the most fundamental of alloys, bronze. The creation of bronze required a marriage of copper and tin, two metals rarely found in the same place. This simple chemical necessity, as historians of technology note, created one of humanity's first long-distance trade networks. Tin from as far away as Cornwall in Britain traveled across continents to meet copper from Cyprus or Anatolia, forcing disparate cultures into contact and exchange. The knowledge of how to smelt, alloy, and cast this revolutionary material moved with the ingots themselves, a shared craft that defined an age. From this practical foundation grew a more enigmatic sibling, alchemy. While often remembered for its mystical goal of transmuting base metals into gold, its deeper aim was a universal understanding of transformation and purity. Alchemical texts and symbolic recipes became a surprising medium of exchange. In China, alchemists sought the elixir of life, experimenting with minerals and compounds in hopes of achieving physical immortality. In the Islamic world, scholars systematized laboratory techniques and theorized about the fundamental qualities of metals, his works later translated into Latin under the name. In Europe, the quest crystallized around the philosopher's stone, a substance believed to enable transmutation. These were not isolated fantasies. They were different cultural expressions of the same core idea, that matter could be perfected, and that hidden knowledge could unlock nature's deepest secrets. The circulation of these texts created an invisible college spanning continents, where a symbol from an Egyptian papyrus might reappear in a Persian manuscript or a European woodcut. The tangible results of this shared inquiry were revolutionary. Consider the legendary Wootz steel from southern India, known later as Damascus steel for the who forged it into blades of legendary sharpness and resilience. Its production was a closely guarded secret, involving a precise process of superheating and slow cooling iron with specific carbon-rich materials. This knowledge, perfected over centuries, traveled through trade and conflict, with its products becoming coveted across the ancient world. European smiths spent generations trying to reverse engineer the mystery locked within those watery, patterned blades. Another widespread technique was mercury gilding, where gold was dissolved in mercury to create an amalgam, applied to an object, and then heated to evaporate the mercury, leaving a thin, flawless layer of gold behind. This dangerous but beautiful process appears in artifacts from Imperial Rome to Han Dynasty China to the temples of, a striking example of a sophisticated technological idea achieving global reach. The movement of raw materials themselves painted a map of desire. Lapis lazuli, the only source of a true celestial blue, was mined from a single remote valley in Afghanistan. Yet this stone appears in the funeral mask in Sumerian cylinder seals and in medieval European illuminated manuscripts. Tin from Britain, gold from the rivers of West Africa, amber from the Baltic, all traveled thousands of miles from their source, pulled by networks of value and craftsmanship that ignored geography. Perhaps the most transformative technological transfer was the alembic still. First developed by Alexandrian alchemists for distillation experiments, it was refined and perfected in the Islamic world. There, it was used to produce essential oils, perfumes, and distilled spirits, knowledge encapsulated in the works of scholars like Al. This technology then passed into medieval Europe, where it would fuel not only the production of alcohols, but also the birth of modern chemistry. It makes you reflect, what is our modern philosopher's stone? The global race for rare earth elements, vital for our smartphones and electric vehicles, or the international research into superconductors and graphene. We are still driven by that ancient alchemical dream to discover new materials that will transform our world. This control over metals and the secrets of their manipulation was never just about commerce or craft, it was about power. The empire that commanded the finest steel, the most reliable bronze, or the gold held a decisive advantage. Thus, the great imperial administrations themselves became the ultimate engines of this exchange, systematically gathering resources, relocating skilled artisans, and standardizing technologies across their realms. They built the infrastructure that let ideas flow, but they also sought to control the flow. A paved Roman road is more than a military supply line, it is a channel for whispers. The greatest paradox of our ancient knowledge map is this: the very empires built to consolidate power often became, unintentionally, the world's most powerful engines for spreading ideas. They played a dual role, both as facilitators through enforced peace and ambitious infrastructure, and as disruptors through conquest and the occasional silencing of rival thought. This is the 16th engine, the imperial paradox. Periods of imperial stability created what historians call a pax, a peace. The Pax Romana across the Mediterranean and the later Pax across Eurasia did not eliminate conflict, but they dramatically lowered the risk of long-distance travel and trade. Safe passage meant a merchant from Syria could plan a journey to Gaul, or a Nestorian monk could traverse the entire Asian steppe with a reasonable expectation of not being robbed or turned back at a warring border. The Mongol Empire, in particular, mastered this. Historian Thomas J. describes their system as an imperial confederation, a network of controlled territories that, for a time, effectively connected the markets of China to the gates of Vienna. Their Yam System, a relay of horse stations stretching thousands of miles, was built for imperial messengers and tax collection. Yet this same network accelerated the movement of everyone from diplomats to doctors, creating a continental speedway for people and the knowledge they carried. Imperial policy itself could wire cultures together. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, governing dozens of different peoples from the Indus to the Nile, adopted Aramaic as its administrative lingua franca. This decision meant that a scribe in Egypt and a tax collector in Babylon were filing reports in the same script, creating a shared bureaucratic language that outlasted the empire itself. Centuries later, Alexander the Great's conquests, while devastating, scattered Greek culture, language, and science across the East, founding cities like Alexandria in Egypt that became permanent hubs of Hellenistic learning. In China, the cosmopolitan Tang dynasty court actively welcomed foreign scholars, artists, and religious figures, from Persian astrologers to Buddhist monks from India, creating a vibrant, synthetic culture in its capital. These were conscious acts of administrative engineering that had profound intellectual side effects. But the imperial hand could also close into a fist. The famous decline of the Library of Alexandria, a slow process over centuries involving conflict and neglect, stands as a symbol of how repositories of knowledge are vulnerable to the tides of political change. Empires could suppress or marginalize local knowledge systems, privileging the worldview of the conqueror. The Mongol expansion itself was marked by periods of immense destruction. Yet, in a stark illustration of this paradox, the very empire that could bring hardship to one region also created the conditions for figures like Marco Polo and to undertake their epic travels. It was under the Mongol peace that technologies like gunpowder, printing, and advanced navigational tools began their accelerated journey from east to west. The empire provided the stage, however violently constructed, upon which a new act of global connection could be performed. It makes you reflect on our own time. How do modern political structures, international alliances, or even global conflicts shape the flow of information today? Our digital highways, too, are built on physical and political infrastructure, from undersea cables to satellite agreements, that can both enable open exchange and become tools for control. This imperial stage, for all its grandeur, was only one part of the theater. While empires carved paths across the land, an even vaster, more fluid network was carrying ideas across the blue horizons of the planet. The sea is the world's oldest open road. While empires carved paths across continents, the ocean was a fluid, borderless highway, connecting shores with a rhythm dictated not by kings, but by the wind itself. This is the 17th Sea, the maritime network that turned port cities into the ultimate melting pots of the ancient world. Picture the docks of 9th century Guangzhou in China or Calicut on India's coast. The air is thick with the smell of salt, spice, and tar. Ships with hulls of teak and sails of woven palm dock side by side, their crews speaking a dozen different tongues. Here, a sailor from Oman might barter with a merchant from Sumatra, while a Persian translator negotiates a price for a crate of fine Chinese celadon ware. This was not just trade, it was a daily, bustling conversation between continents. The Indian Ocean was the heart of this system, and its pulse was the monsoon. For 6 months of the year, winds blow steadily from the southwest, and for the other 6, they reverse from the northeast. Ancient mariners learned to harness this predictable rhythm. They could sail from the Red Sea to India on the summer monsoon, wait out the season in a port city, and catch the winter winds back home. This created a shared calendar that synchronized lives across half the planet, from East Africa to Indonesia. It meant communities thousands of miles apart were directly linked by an annual cycle of arrival and departure, fostering relationships that lasted generations. The evidence for these direct, long-distance connections lies on the maritime archaeologists study shipwrecks like time capsules. The Belitung wreck, a 9th century Arab dhow discovered off the coast of Indonesia, is a stunning example. Its cargo was a treasure trove of tens of thousands of Chinese ceramics, along with gold and silverware from the Tang dynasty. This single ship proves that Arab traders were making the immense voyage all the way to China and back, carrying wholesale cargoes that would cater to Middle Eastern tastes. The wreck is a physical snapshot of a moment in a continuous, thriving dialogue between two distant empires. These voyages terminated in port cities, which became laboratories of cultural fusion. Alexandria, Aden, Malacca, these were not just economic centers, but truly cosmopolitan hubs. In these crowded, vibrant cities, communities settled and thrived. Jewish merchants maintained correspondence networks from Cairo to Qian. Armenian traders established outposts from the Crimea to the Philippines. Chinese communities lived in ports across Southeast Asia, while Arab and Persian merchants set up quarters in Chinese ports. These groups acted as permanent cultural brokers, translating not just languages, but customs, legal systems, and ideas. They built temples, mosques, and churches that stood in the same districts, creating a daily reality of pluralism. The exchange on the docks was intensely practical. Shipbuilding technologies crossed oceans. The lateen sail, a triangular rig that allowed ships to sail efficiently against the wind, likely originated in the Indian Ocean and was adopted in the Mediterranean, revolutionizing navigation there. From China came the stern-mounted rudder and, most crucially, the magnetic compass. This simple device, which began as a geomantic tool for divination, was adapted for sea travel, giving mariners a reliable guide when clouds obscured the stars. Navigational knowledge itself was a prized commodity, passed down in pilot guides and star charts which detailed coastlines, ports, and celestial markers across the Indian Ocean. Botanical cargo transformed landscapes. Bananas, originally from Southeast Asia, were carried across the Indian Ocean to Africa, where they became a staple crop. Sugarcane, first domesticated in New Guinea, spread to India and then, via Arab agriculturalists, to the Mediterranean and eventually the Americas. These were not passive transfers. The knowledge of how to cultivate, irrigate, and process these plants traveled with the cuttings and seeds, carried by the very merchants who profited from their trade. The power that could control these sea lanes wielded immense influence. Consider the empire, based in Sumatra from the 7th to the 13th centuries. It was a sea-based kingdom with hardly any territorial hinterland. Its wealth and power came entirely from controlling the vital Strait of Malacca, the narrow funnel through which most trade between China and India flowed. Rulers did not just tax passing ships, they offered safe harbor, repaired vessels, and provided warehouses. They also patronized Buddhist learning, attracting scholars and making their capital Palembang a major intellectual center that drew pilgrims from as far away as China. Its power was pure network power, a testament to the strategic value of a maritime crossroads. It makes you wonder, what are our digital equivalents of these ancient port cities? The major server hubs in places like Amsterdam, the global social media platforms, the open-source repositories where code is shared and remixed. These are our cosmopolitan hubs where data, rather than spices, is offloaded, translated, and sent on its way. The sea connected continents with a fluid, embracing reach, but another vast and challenging landscape served as a terrestrial bridge of a different, harder character. Grasslands stretched to the horizon, an ocean of wind and grass where empires seemed to vanish. Yet this apparent emptiness was a deceptive stage. Across the vast Eurasian steppe, from the Danube to the Great Wall, nomadic confederations like the Scythians, and Turks moved with the seasons, their lives a study in relentless mobility. Historians like Bari emphasize that this very mobility created a deep, persistent connectivity, making the steppe not a barrier but an 18th bridge, a cultural conduit of astonishing efficiency. Think of it as the steppe road, a northern parallel to the Silk Roads, where light, valuable goods and world-changing martial technologies flowed with the herds. These pastoral nomads were the ultimate intermediaries, living in the spaces between the great sedentary civilizations of China, Persia, India, and Europe, and linking them all through a web of trade, alliance, and sometimes conflict. Their role was often overlooked by the scribes of settled empires, who saw them as outsiders, but archaeology reveals their true legacy as essential agents of exchange. The logistics of their life demanded constant movement, which meant they were always in contact with different settled frontiers. A Scythian chieftain might acquire fine Chinese silk through intermediaries, trade it for Persian gold work, and have it buried with him in a Kurgan burial mound on the Ukrainian plains, creating a single archaeological site that maps a continent. Their need for portable wealth favored objects of high value and small size, jewelry, coins, and finely crafted weapons, which became the currency of this long-distance dialogue. But their most profound gifts were not carried in saddlebags, they were carried in the minds and skills of the people themselves. Consider the chariot. This revolutionary engine of war and status first appeared on the steppe margins before sweeping into the ancient kingdoms of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and China. The knowledge of its construction, the spoke-wheeled design and the horse training required, moved with the steppe peoples who perfected its use. Centuries later, the stirrup and the powerful composite bow, made from layers of wood, horn, and sinew, followed similar paths out of the steppe, transforming cavalry warfare and, in turn, the social structures of Europe and Asia. Even the flow of gunpowder technology from China westward was accelerated by the Mongol empires that controlled the steppe highway. The cultural transfers were just as significant. Shamanistic spiritual practices, with their focus on animal spirits and communion with nature, influenced the folk traditions of many frontier societies. Epic poetry, recited around campfires, carried mythic histories and heroic ideals across thousands of miles, with echoes found in tales from the Norse sagas to the Persian Book of Kings. And we have already seen the distinctive animal-style art, with its coiled predators and intertwined beasts, a visual language stamped on gold belt buckles and tattooed onto skin that became a prestige style from the Black Sea to the plateau. A powerful illustration is the Confederation, whose prolonged dynamic with Han China shaped both empires. Through both tense conflict and structured trade, the acquired Chinese agricultural goods and luxury items, while the Han adopted superior cavalry tactics and reformed their own military. Their diplomatic exchanges, involving hostage princes and marriage alliances, created a fragile but real channel for cultural and technological knowledge to pass in both directions. This forces a reflective question: who are our modern steppe nomads? Digital freelancers who work across time zones, global consultants who live in airports, even the algorithms that constantly move data across invisible networks. They are the new intermediaries, facilitating exchange in the spaces between our own settled digital institutions. The steppe was a zone of fluid, continuous movement, but some knowledge transferred in sudden, concentrated bursts under the most intense pressure imaginable. A Roman engineer, captured after a disastrous battle in the deserts of Parthia, finds his life spared not out of mercy, but utility. His captors demand he teach them how to build the very siege engines he once used against them. This is the 19th crucible, a paradox where conflict and captivity became brutal, unintended engines of knowledge diffusion. War, for all its destruction, forced technologies and skills to move with a sudden, violent urgency. Armies were the ultimate vectors, carrying not just soldiers, but entire toolkits of innovation. Observing an enemy's superior technology on the battlefield created an immediate, desperate need to understand and replicate it. Military historians note that nothing spurs innovation like the sight of your own walls crumbling under a new kind of artillery. The massive counterweight trebuchet, a transformative siege weapon, traveled from its likely origins in the Islamic world to Europe during the Crusades, as each side observed, captured, and iterated upon the other's designs. Greek fire, the terrifying incendiary weapon of the Byzantine Empire, was a state secret so closely guarded that its exact formula remains a mystery. Yet the knowledge of such a weapon's existence spurred chemists and engineers across the Mediterranean to experiment with their own fiery compounds. The movement of people in war's wake was equally transformative. After the Battle of Talas in Central Asia, captured Chinese papermakers were brought to Samarkand, transplanting a world-changing technology into the Islamic world. The Mongol Empire perfected this grim logic. During their sweeping conquests, they systematically identified and spared artisans, engineers, and scholars from captured cities, transporting them across thousands of miles to work on imperial projects in or beyond. This forced diaspora created a sudden, concentrated pooling of technical knowledge from China, Persia, and the Arab world, a brutal but effective form of intellectual consolidation. Earlier, the closure of the Athenian Academy by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian in the 6th century prompted Greek philosophers to seek refuge in Persia, carrying their philosophical traditions eastward, where they would later influence Islamic thought. Nestorian Christian scholars, facing pressure in the Byzantine Empire, moved steadily eastward along the Silk Roads, establishing communities in Persia, India, and even China, where they served as translators and mediators of knowledge. Even the protracted violence of the Crusades, despite its tragic human cost, opened unexpected channels. Returning crusaders and pilgrims brought back more than relics. They introduced Western Europe to advanced mathematics from Arabic texts, refined medical knowledge from the great hospitals of the Middle East, and a lasting taste for spices, sugar, and citrus fruits that would reshape European cuisine and agriculture. The flow was not one way. European castle architecture influenced fortifications in the Levant. This historical pattern forces a difficult but necessary reflection. In our own time, how do modern conflicts and the global movement of people seeking safety inadvertently reshape our networks of knowledge? The diaspora of academics, doctors, and engineers from regions in turmoil often transplants expertise into new soils, where it takes root and contributes to fresh innovation. From the chaotic, unintended exchanges born of conflict, we find a deliberate and structured counterpart, one built on ceremony, gift-giving, and the art of peace. A lion paces in a gilded cage, a living gift from one emperor to another. While war and trade moved ideas through chaos or commerce, the 20th channel was one of deliberate, magnificent spectacle, the diplomatic mission. When an embassy arrived at a foreign court, its procession was a carefully curated display of a kingdom's wealth, power, and intellectual reach. These were not mere social calls. They were state-sponsored intelligence-gathering operations wrapped in the velvet glove of ceremony. The letters, a cache of clay tablets from ancient Egypt, reveal a bustling diplomatic network where pharaohs and Near Eastern kings exchanged not only demands and flattery, but also detailed requests for skilled physicians, master architects, and rare medicinal plants. A gift was never just an object. It was a coded message and a potential technology transfer. This was a global gift economy among elites, where the value lay in the rarity and knowledge embedded in the offering. The Assyrian king might send a breeding pair of exotic horses to Egypt, a living upgrade to their cavalry stock. The Byzantine emperor could dispatch a complex water clock to the Tang court, a marvel of hydraulic engineering that was also a silent lesson in mechanics. Books were perhaps the ultimate prestige object, a library presented from one ruler to another representing the distilled wisdom of a civilization. These exchanges often came with explicit requests for the experts who created them. Chinese dynastic histories record emperors formally inviting Buddhist monks from India to translate scriptures and Indian astronomers to help reform the calendar. Islamic caliphs, seeking to build monumental domes and canals, actively recruited Byzantine engineers familiar with the architectural secrets of the Roman world. Perhaps no single gift captures the symbolic reach of this diplomatic network better than the giraffe. In the early 15th century, a magnificent giraffe arrived at the Ming court in Beijing, a gift from a Bengali ruler delivered by the vast fleet of Admiral He. To the Chinese court, this creature with its impossible neck and serene demeanor was identified as a mythical auspicious beast whose appearance signaled heavenly favor and virtuous rule. The giraffe was a walking testament to the reach of the Ming treasure voyages, but it was also a living piece of geographic and zoological knowledge, expanding the very understanding of the world's fauna. Its journey was diplomacy as theater, where the gift carried layers of political, cultural, and scientific meaning. This ancient protocol of ambassadorial exchange holds up a mirror to our own time. What are our modern royal gifts? A state visit today might involve the exchange of cultural artifacts for a museum exhibition, the sharing of environmental monitoring technology, or a joint commitment to fund an international research institute. When leaders exchange scientists instead of silks, or agree to collaborate on a space telescope rather than a marriage alliance, they are participating in the same timeless dance of prestige and knowledge sharing. These formal channels, however, relied entirely on a skill that could unlock all others, the ability to speak across the divide of language itself. A merchant in a Samarkand market switches effortlessly to Chinese, then to Persian, negotiating not just a price, but the very meaning of the words being exchanged. These individuals were the 21st interpreter, the bilinguals, translators, and cultural brokers who lived in the liminal space between worlds. Without them, the grand networks of trade and empire would have been silent. They were the human infrastructure, the living software that made the ancient world's hardware of roads and ships actually communicate. In the Ottoman Empire, the dragoman was more than a translator. He was a diplomatic linchpin, a trusted intermediary who navigated the treacherous waters of international politics, his linguistic skill granting him immense, though precarious, influence. This role existed everywhere exchange flourished. The merchants, with their networks stretching from Byzantium to N, did not merely carry goods, they carried messages, contracts, and cultural nuance, their multilingualism a currency as valuable as the silk they traded. But translation went far beyond the bazaar. It became an intellectual project of staggering ambition. In Baghdad's House of Wisdom and later in the translation schools of Spain, teams of scholars undertook a systematic labor. They did not simply swap words from one language to another. As Scholar reminds us, translation in these contexts was a profoundly creative act. It required scholars to absorb, interpret, and then rebuild complex ideas in an entirely new linguistic and cultural framework. Imagine the challenge. How do you translate Aristotle's concept of essence into Arabic, or a Buddhist idea of emptiness into elegant Chinese poetry, when no direct equivalent exists? This forced incredible innovation. Scholars had to develop new technical vocabularies, creating Arabic terms for Greek philosophical concepts that would shape Islamic thought for centuries. They compiled massive bilingual glossaries, essentially writing the first dictionaries for scholarly exchange. They grappled with the core philosophical problem of meaning itself, debating whether a translation should be literal to the words or faithful to the spirit of the idea. Key figures embody this monumental work. In the Islamic world, a Nestorian Christian led the effort to translate the entire medical corpus of Galen from Greek into Arabic. His method was meticulous. He would seek out multiple manuscripts of a single work, compare them to find the most accurate version, and only then begin the painstaking translation, often adding his own insightful commentaries. His work preserved Greek medicine that had been lost to the West, and his translations became the standard textbooks for physicians from Cordoba to Delhi. Far to the east, the monk achieved something similar for Buddhism in China. Previous translations of Buddhist sutras into Chinese were often clumsy, trapped by a too literal approach. With his deep understanding of both Sanskrit and the literary elegance of Chinese, revolutionized the process. He gathered a team of hundreds of scholars and focused on conveying the meaning and spiritual resonance of the texts. His translations, such as the Diamond Sutra, are not just accurate, they are literary masterpieces that shaped East Asian Buddhism forever. Sometimes the need for this multilingual bridging was carved in stone. The stone, that famous slab from Ptolemaic Egypt, is the ultimate administrative testament to this necessity. Its decree is inscribed in 3 scripts: hieroglyphic Egyptian, Demotic Egyptian, and Greek. It was a public announcement, ensuring that the priestly class, the common people, and the ruling Greek bureaucracy could all read the same law. It is a physical snapshot of a state acknowledging that to govern, it must speak in multiple tongues. This stone, and the centuries of work by figures like and force a reflective question. Who are our crucial translators today? They are not just the interpreters at the United Nations. They are the programmers who translate human needs into code, the scientists who make complex research accessible to the public, and the educators who bridge gaps in understanding across communities. They continue the ancient, essential work of making the unfamiliar comprehensible. Yet for all its power, the written translation captured knowledge that was already fixed. A parallel, more fluid system operated in real time, passed not through ink, but through breath and memory, keeping wisdom alive in the spaces between the written word. A story can travel where a scroll cannot. Long before the first libraries, knowledge moved on the human voice, carried by singers, storytellers, and ritual specialists who were living archives. This is the 22nd oratory, the world of oral tradition and the memory arts. In West Africa, griots could recite the history of a kingdom for generations without a single written note. In ancient India, Vedic priests preserved hymns of immense complexity through flawless recitation, passing them down with precise tonal inflections for over 3,000 years. These were not casual storytellers. They were highly trained custodians of a culture's entire intellectual and technical heritage. Anthropologists like Jack Goody have studied the intricate interplay between orality and literacy, showing that oral systems are not primitive, but sophisticated, dynamic vehicles for knowledge, especially resilient in societies where writing was absent or restricted. When knowledge must be remembered, it is often encoded in the most memorable forms: poetry, song, and myth. This made oral tradition a powerful medium for exchange, as a compelling story or a catchy song could cross linguistic and cultural boundaries through sheer performance. The techniques these keepers used were ingenious. Technical knowledge, from the complex star paths used by Polynesian navigators to cross the vast Pacific to the precise recipes for smelting iron in sub-Saharan Africa, was woven into chants and verses. These were living manuals, where the rhythm and rhyme acted as a mnemonic device, ensuring that vital information was passed on accurately. Cultures worldwide developed specialized memory systems. Australian Aboriginal are a profound example, where the landscape itself becomes a memory palace. Detailed knowledge of geography, navigation, and ancestral law is encoded in long, intricate songs that describe the features of the land, allowing a person to traverse thousands of miles by singing their way from one landmark to the next. In ancient Greece, the method of loci, also known as the memory palace technique, trained orators to mentally place ideas they wished to remember in specific locations within an imagined building, walking through it to retrieve information in perfect order. These systems turn the mind into a library. The cross-cultural reach of oral tradition is stunningly illustrated by epic poetry. The Epic of Gilgamesh, from ancient Mesopotamia, contains themes of friendship, the quest for immortality, and a great flood that resonate powerfully with stories found later in Greek mythology, the Hebrew Bible, and possibly even Indian epics. While direct transmission is difficult to prove, the echoes suggest a very ancient, slow diffusion of core narratives along trade and migration routes, adapted and retold by countless voices over. The epic itself was a vehicle, carrying philosophical questions and cultural values across time and space. It makes you wonder, what are our modern oral traditions? Podcasts and audiobooks that we listen to while moving through our day, viral audio clips and songs that spread globally in hours, even the shared inside jokes and stories that define online communities. These are our era's dynamic spoken word networks. They continue the ancient work of shaping collective memory through sound. Yet these stories, whether sung or written, all unfolded within a framework that every culture had to define for itself, the silent, steady measurement of time's passage. To plant a seed, you must know when the rains will come. This fundamental need, shared by every agricultural society from the Euphrates to the Yellow River, gave rise to the 23rd cycle, the global quest to measure and master time. Calendars were not just lists of days, they were the operating systems of ancient civilization, tools to align human activity with the cosmos. Their creation demanded a deep, collaborative science, one that flowed along the same routes as spices and scriptures. The core challenge was a celestial mismatch. The moon's cycle is about 29.5 days, giving us months. The Earth's journey around the sun is roughly 365.25 days, defining our year. A purely lunar calendar, like the early Islamic calendar, drifts through the seasons, so a festival in spring might slowly migrate to winter over decades. For farmers and priests who needed to schedule planting and sacred rites, this was unacceptable. The brilliant solution, developed independently in places like Babylon, China, and was the lunisolar calendar. This system tracked the moon's phases but periodically inserted an extra month, a process called intercalation, to keep the lunar months in sync with the solar year. The knowledge of how and when to intercalate was sacred, often guarded by priestly astronomers, and this knowledge was exchanged. Babylonian methods of predicting lunar cycles and eclipses influenced Greek and later Indian astronomy. The Chinese developed elaborate systems, with intercalary months decided by imperial astronomers observing the heavens, their methods noted by scholars across East Asia. But perhaps the most breathtaking independent achievement was the Maya calendar system in the Americas. Isolated from the Old World, Maya astronomers achieved staggering precision. Their long count calendar measured vast cycles of time with a complex base 20 mathematics. Their solar year calculation was even more accurate than the Julian calendar used in Europe at the time. This highlights a profound duality in our map of knowledge. Intense local innovation could achieve similar ends, yet when connections existed, the best ideas spread rapidly. The diffusion of specific timekeeping units created a shared grammar for history. The 7-day week, with its planetary associations, originated in Mesopotamia and was adopted by the Hebrews. Then the Romans, and through Christianity and Islam, became a global rhythm. The division of the year into 12 zodiacal signs, another Babylonian concept linked to constellations, traveled to Greece, India, and the Islamic world, blending astronomy with astrology and medicine. To mark longer spans, cultures developed the concept of eras. The Chinese dated by imperial dynasties. The Mediterranean world used Olympiads or the founding of Rome. These systems allowed scholars to synchronize events, to place the reign of a Persian king alongside a philosopher's life in Greece, beginning the work of a unified historical timeline. This intellectual infrastructure was powered by remarkable devices. The water clock, or clepsydra, invented in Egypt and Mesopotamia, measured time by the steady drip of water. This technology traveled to Greece, where it timed speeches in courts, and to China, where elaborate hydraulic clocks were built in imperial observatories. Sundials, which used the sun's shadow, evolved from simple obelisks in Egypt to portable, calibrated instruments in the Greek and Roman world. An exquisite example of synthesis is the calendar. In the 11th century, a group of Persian scholars, including the famed poet and mathematician, was commissioned to create a more accurate solar calendar. They calculated the length of the tropical year with remarkable precision and designed a system of leap years that was superior to the Julian calendar then used in Europe. The calendar, used in Persia for centuries, stands as a testament to the high level of scientific collaboration in the medieval Islamic world, where astronomy served both faith and state. It makes you reflect, what does our modern global use of the calendar represent? It is the culmination of this ancient drive for synchronization, a single framework for international commerce, diplomacy, and science, inherited from a reform of that very Roman Julian calendar. By measuring time, societies could coordinate on a scale never before possible. They could plan the harvest, mobilize labor, and launch the most audacious collaborative projects of the ancient world, projects that would literally reshape the earth beneath their feet. Stone can dream of impossible spans. The Great Wall stitching mountains together, the aqueducts striding across valleys on slender arches, the Grand Canal connecting rivers across a continent. These are the signatures of empires, written not on parchment, but on the earth itself. We often see them as triumphs of isolated genius, the ultimate expressions of a single culture's will. But what if these colossal 24th collaborations, these megaprojects, also whisper of a quieter conversation happening across the known world? The sheer, staggering ambition to reshape geography suggests a shared human confidence, a pool of logistical and engineering principles that may have been discussed, refined, and inspired through the very networks of exchange we have been mapping. While each was undoubtedly an indigenous achievement, the fundamental grammar of large-scale construction seems to have been a global language. Engineering historians note that core principles like the arch, the dome, and advanced surveying techniques did not stay confined by borders. They traveled with the people who understood them. Consider the graceful, gravity-defying arc of a Roman aqueduct. Its principle relies on the compressive strength of stone, a concept perfected in Rome, but whose earliest whispers might be traced through a chain of influence. Some scholars see a fascinating parallel in the much older Persian qanat, those underground water channels. While a qanat is a tunnel and an aqueduct is a bridge, both are monumental solutions to the same brutal problem, moving life-giving water across arid landscapes. The knowledge of hydrology, of calculating gentle, consistent slopes over vast distances, this was a sophisticated science. It is not difficult to imagine Roman engineers, stationed in the eastern provinces, observing these ancient Persian systems and absorbing the underlying principles of water management, which they then translated into their own breathtaking, above-ground architecture. The dialogue of the dome presents another compelling case. The Romans achieved the concrete dome of the Pantheon, a masterpiece of empirical engineering. Centuries later, Byzantine architects faced the same challenge, but with different materials and a new spiritual ambition for weightless, luminous space. Their solution in the using pendentives, those curved triangular supports, to transition a square base into a circular dome was a revolutionary leap. This knowledge of spanning vast interior volumes did not vanish. It traveled, influencing the great domes of Islamic architecture, like the Mosque in, and later inspiring the Renaissance architects of Florence. It was a slow, centuries-long conversation in mortar and ambition. The movement of the minds behind these projects was often as dramatic as the structures themselves. Skilled laborers, master architects, and hydrological experts were sometimes the spoils of war or the gifts of diplomacy. We know that after military campaigns, empires routinely relocated entire communities of artisans. A master bridge builder from Syria might find himself put to work on a frontier fortification in Dacia. A Chinese engineer knowledgeable about sluice gates and erosion control could have shared that wisdom with counterparts in Central Asia during a period of diplomatic exchange. The Grand Canal of China, a project spanning dynasties, required managing water flow on a continental scale. The techniques for lock construction and channel dredging developed there represent a summit of hydraulic engineering. Could reports of this marvel, carried by merchants or envoys to the ancient Near East, have inspired similar, though smaller scale, ambitions in Mesopotamia or Egypt? It is a tantalizing possibility that highlights how megaprojects were not just physical feats, but information magnets, drawing discussion from across the networked world. This legacy of collective ambition is far from dead. Look at our modern megaprojects. The International Space Station, a habitat assembled in orbit by nations that once competed in a space race. The Large Hadron Collider, a particle accelerator built by a global consortium of scientists beneath the French-Swiss border. Even the vast interconnected web of the Internet's physical infrastructure, the undersea cables and satellite networks. These are our era's aqueducts and canals. They are built not by a single empire, but by a shared, international will to reach a little further, to see a little deeper. They continue that ancient tradition of pooling expertise on a staggering scale, proving that when humanity faces a truly monumental challenge, we still instinctively turn to the oldest tool we have, collaboration. And from this century's long collaboration on everything from calendars to canals, something subtle yet profound began to emerge in the hearts and minds of those who participated. A merchant in Tang dynasty might savor Persian dates, a scholar in Baghdad might quote Aristotle, a monk might debate logic with a visitor from Korea. They were becoming, in a sense, citizens of something larger than their own homeland. They were developing a shared cosmopolitan identity, a feeling of belonging to a wider, intellectually vibrant world. This intangible network of the mind is perhaps the most enduring legacy of all. The merchant in N, the monk in, and the scholar in Baghdad began to see themselves not just as subjects of an emperor or followers of a faith, but as participants in a vast, humming conversation. This is the 25th identity, the quiet birth of a cosmopolitan spirit and a shared intellectual heritage. It was a cultural mindset, a feeling of belonging to a wider, interconnected world that grew naturally from centuries of exchange. You can see it in the ruins of Khanum, a Greek-style city on the banks of the Oxus River in ancient Afghanistan. Here, a citizen might worship at a temple to Zeus, read philosophical maxims from Delphi inscribed in stone, yet handle coins stamped with Greek and Indian scripts, and discuss Buddhist ideas from nearby monasteries. This person was an ancient global citizen, long before the term existed. Philosophers of the time were already grappling with this expansive sense of belonging. The Greeks had a word for it, meaning the inhabited, civilized world. It was a concept that stretched beyond any single polis or kingdom to encompass the entire known human community. In China, a parallel idea flourished, all under heaven. This was not just a political claim, but a philosophical framework for ordering the world, a vision that could, in theory, accommodate diverse peoples under a shared cosmic harmony. As modern philosopher notes, our contemporary ideas of cosmopolitanism, of finding common ground with those who seem different, have deep roots in these ancient encounters. It was in the sustained contact zones, the borderlands and bustling port cities, that hybrid identities truly took shape. People, languages blended, and new, syncretic faiths emerged that spoke to this interconnected reality. Take Manichaeism, a religion founded by the prophet Mani in 3rd century Persia. It was consciously crafted as a universal faith, weaving together elements from Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and Buddhism. Its scriptures were translated into more than 10 languages, from Latin and it spread from North Africa to the South China Sea, offering a spiritual home to those who lived between cultures. This cosmopolitan spirit also created a shared elite culture that transcended political borders. A Roman emperor could collect Chinese silk and Persian glass. A Tang dynasty aristocrat might admire Central Asian music and dance, while a Persian ruler would prize Indian steel and Greek medical texts. They admired each other's artifacts and learning, creating a kind of international language of prestige and sophistication. Crucial to all of this were the lingua francas, the common tongues that allowed these transnational conversations to happen. For centuries, Aramaic was the administrative language of the Near East. Greek became the language of scholarship and elite culture across the Eastern Mediterranean and deep into Asia after Alexander. Sanskrit connected the learned circles of India with those in Southeast Asia. Later, Arabic would become the vehicle for science and philosophy from Spain to the Indus. These languages did not erase local tongues. They created a new layer of connection, allowing a scholar from Egypt to debate a point of astronomy with a counterpart in Baghdad using the same technical vocabulary. Perhaps no place embodied this cosmopolitan reality more vividly than the Tang dynasty capital of N. It was one of the largest and most international cities on Earth. Its markets thronged with merchants, Turkish horsemen, Korean students, and Persian artisans. Nestorian Christian churches stood alongside Zoroastrian fire temples, Buddhist monasteries, and Islamic mosques. In its academies, scholars pored over texts from across Asia. This was not mere tolerance, it was a vibrant, daily reality of pluralism. It makes you reflect, is our current sense of global identity something entirely new? Or is it simply an ancient human pattern, amplified by our technology? We grapple with the same questions of integration and difference that the residents of N or Khanum did. We curate hybrid identities online, blend cultural influences in our food and art, and participate in global conversations. The pattern feels deeply familiar because its foundations were laid ago. Yet this interconnected world, for all its brilliance, was not without its limits and blind spots. Our map of connection has a shadow. For every idea that traveled, countless others stayed home. For every technology shared, another faded into silence, its secret lost with the last person who understood it. The ancient world was not a perfectly connected web, but a patchwork of brilliant networks separated by vast oceans of silence. This is the 26th limit, the reality of knowledge lost, rejected, and the myth of total connectivity. We must confront the sobering truth that for all the exchange, profound barriers kept entire worlds of thought apart. Some knowledge simply could not cross the distance. The civilizations of the Americas, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Oceania developed for thousands of years in substantial isolation from the Afro-Eurasian network. The result was not backwardness, but breathtaking parallel innovation. The Maya astronomers, as we saw, calculated a solar year with stunning precision, entirely on their own. In West Africa, complex societies like the culture mastered iron smelting independently. In the high Andes, the Inca engineered terraced mountainsides and a road system rivaling Rome's, without the wheel or written script as we know it. These were not lesser knowledge systems, they were different ones, born from unique relationships with their environments. Their isolation meant their insights, their philosophies, their solutions to universal human problems remained largely unheard in the conversations across the steppe or the Indian Ocean. Even within the connected continents, knowledge faced walls of cultural resistance. A technology might be deemed irrelevant outside its home. The sophisticated Chinese civil service examination system, which selected government officials based on merit and classical learning, was a marvel of administrative engineering. But to a nomadic steppe confederation or a feudal European kingdom, it held little practical value. The knowledge was there, but the desire to adopt it was not. Other ideas were too deeply embedded in a specific cultural or religious worldview to be easily translated. Some knowledge was actively guarded. Guilds and craft families protected their techniques as trade secrets, the source of their livelihood and status. The exact composition of Roman concrete, which allowed it to set underwater and endure for, died with the artisans. The formula for Greek fire, the Byzantine Empire's fearsome naval weapon, was a state secret so closely guarded it vanished from history. Deliberate suppression also played a role. Political or religious authorities sometimes saw foreign ideas as threats to power or orthodoxy. A ruling dynasty might ban certain texts, or a priestly class might reject astronomical models that challenged a divine cosmology. And then there was the sheer fragility of knowledge itself. It resided in libraries of papyrus and parchment, in the memories of elders, in workshops vulnerable to fire and flood. The famous burning of the Library of Alexandria is a potent symbol, but knowledge loss was more often a slow decay. Empires collapsed, trade routes fell into disuse, and the peace that allowed scholars to travel shattered. When the institutions that supported learning faded, the chains of transmission were severed. A technology might be too complex for a smaller, struggling society to maintain, and so it was forgotten. Consider the independent invention of agriculture, a revolution that happened at least 6 separate times around the globe, in the Fertile Crescent, China, the Andes, the eastern United States, and New Guinea. Each was a monumental intellectual leap, achieved with little to no contact between these pioneers. This fact alone shatters any simple story of diffusion. It tells us that humanity's genius is a deep well, capable of drawing the same profound conclusions in complete isolation. So what does this mean for our map? It means the ancient conversation was rich, but it was also full of static and silence. Vast chapters of human ingenuity were written in languages we are still struggling to decipher. It forces a humbling reflection. In our own hyper-connected world, with its digital networks spanning the globe, what knowledge are we still failing to transfer? What perspectives are silenced by language barriers, algorithmic biases, or cultural dismissal? What brilliant, local solutions to global problems remain unheard because they do not fit the dominant model? The limits of the past hold up a mirror to the gaps in our own global conversation. Having traced the brilliant exchanges and acknowledged the profound silences, we can finally ask what this entire journey across the ancient mind means for us, here and now. Our journey across the ancient world reveals a breathtaking tapestry of connection. We have followed knowledge along dusty caravan trails, through bustling port cities, and into the quiet scriptoria of great libraries. We have seen astronomy refined by Babylonian, Greek, and Indian minds, mathematics transformed by a numeral traveling from India to Baghdad, and faiths adapting as they crossed continents. This was not a series of isolated triumphs, but a single, sprawling, collaborative project. The key takeaway is unmistakable. Civilization itself was built on exchange. Progress was rarely a solitary flash of genius in a vacuum. It was a relay race, where the baton of an idea was passed from hand to hand, culture to culture, each runner adding their own strength and insight to the journey. A Chinese papermaking technique reaches Samarkand and fuels an Islamic golden age of scholarship. A Greek philosophical text, translated into Arabic and then Latin, helps spark a European Renaissance. a Buddhist monk's pilgrimage weaves a thread of thought from India to Korea. Our modern world, with all its divisions, is the direct inheritor of this ancient, open network. This historical map offers us more than just a story about the past. It provides a crucial lens for viewing our present. Our most pressing global challenges, from climate change to public health crises, do not respect national borders. They are planetary puzzles, and like the ancient astronomers who pooled observations to map the heavens, or the physicians who compiled remedies from every known tradition, we will only solve them through the same spirit of open, cross-cultural collaboration. The isolation of knowledge is a luxury we can no longer afford. The Roman philosopher Seneca, observing the interconnected society of his own time, offered a timeless truth. He wrote, "No one of us can flourish without the others." For the ancients, this flourishing meant shared calendars to predict the harvest, traded technologies to purify water, and blended artistic styles to express the divine. For us, it means shared data to track a changing climate, open research to develop new medicines, and a collective will to preserve our shared cultural heritage. The networks are faster now, but the human imperative remains the same. We are still participants in that great, ongoing conversation. So I encourage you to reflect on the connections in your own life. The device you hold, the food you eat, the ideas that shape your worldview, they are all endpoints on a map whose lines were drawn thousands of years ago. In the comments, I would love to hear what aspect of this ancient knowledge network surprised you most. Was it the journey of a single game like chess, or the quiet work of translators in Baghdad? If you found this exploration valuable and want to join more journeys into the mysteries of our shared past, please subscribe. The story of human connection is far from over. We are still writing